In many households, there is one financial belief that sits above all others. It rarely gets debated, and it certainly never gets modeled in a spreadsheet. The belief is simple: gold never betrays. It is rarely treated as a standard asset class inside a diversified portfolio. It acts as the entire portfolio, the ultimate, infallible plan for the future. Think about how gold actually enters the room. It rarely involves a login screen or an annual statement. It involves a physical ritual. A locked cupboard opens. A heavy wooden box is brought down. Layers of fabric are peeled back with a kind of reverence usually reserved for expensive crockery or newborns. Long before anyone in the family understands the concept of inflation or compound interest, the psychological hierarchy is set. Gold enters the mind as safety you can touch. It operates entirely on emotion, establishing itself as the family's core financial identity before logic even has a chance to speak. You see this dynamic clearest in public spaces, particularly at a large family wedding. Here, gold behaves as a silent social ledger. Relatives are noticing who wore what, whose daughter received what, and which sets are heirlooms. Look closely, and you realize the family is asking this one asset to execute 3 completely different jobs at the exact same time. It has to signal economic progress to the room. It has to preserve family history. And quietly, it has to serve as a highly visible emergency backup if life suddenly turns sour. That is a massive burden to place on a single instrument. Yet families trust it entirely because gold is incredibly legible. There are no confusing mutual fund documents, no market terminology to decipher, and no men in blazers talking about basis points. But that extreme legibility hides a trap. Familiarity is a terrible, unsupervised portfolio manager. When an asset feels so deeply reassuring to hold, it anchors families to comfortable decisions, keeping capital locked in place even when better growth opportunities surround them. When a single item carries the heavy burden of social status, inherited memory, and future financial confidence all at once, objective wealth analysis breaks down. You can no longer accurately measure the return on an asset when you are simultaneously using it to measure your family's dignity. Step away from the emotional weight of a family gathering and walk into a modern financial planning meeting. The conversation changes completely. Here, capital isn't sentimental, it is strictly mechanical. Modern allocation gives different tools specific jobs: cash for immediate safety, debt for short-term stability, and equities for long-term growth. But traditionally, this structure collapses. Massive pressures, retirement, medical emergencies, inflation, are forced into one narrow channel: gold. The system jams. The reason it jams comes down to core economic mechanics. Gold is inert. It's a piece of metal sitting perfectly still inside a locker. Equities, on the other hand, represent stakes in active businesses. They produce goods, generate cash flows, and actively expand over time. If a family goes to work every day, trades their time for income, and stores surplus in an inert asset, they create an exhausting imbalance. The family works relentlessly, while their capital stays fast asleep. Over-allocating to a purely protective asset produces a dangerous illusion. It makes a family feel secure, having something heavy to hold, while their wealth fails to compound. It is easy to look at this dynamic and assume our parents or grandparents simply lacked financial literacy. That misreads the situation completely. Their attachment to gold was a calculated strategy for historical survival. Think about the legal and social reality a few decades ago, specifically for women. They often lacked formal property rights in their own names. Employment options were heavily restricted. Access to independent banking tools was rare. Within that highly restricted system, gold offered a lifeline. It couldn't be easily seized in a property dispute. It was portable across a marriage or a crisis. It was the only rational, self-contained insurance policy a woman could carry across borders or generations. When mothers handed heavy bangles to younger brides, they were transferring the most robust form of financial independence they knew how to give. It was highly intelligent asset protection, perfectly calibrated for extreme constraints. Today, those structural constraints have largely lifted. The modern financial landscape is vast, offering women and families direct access to markets, independent property ownership, and vehicles specifically designed for aggressive compounding. We can deeply respect the survival tactics of the past without trapping our own current capital inside them. Acknowledging that our parents made brilliant choices for their era does not obligate us to apply their limitations to our own financial strategy. The path forward starts by drawing a hard line between two distinct economic functions: preserving the value you already have and rapidly building the wealth you still need. This chart illustrates the difference perfectly. If you ask a safety asset to outrun aggressive inflation and exponentially grow your net worth, you are demanding it perform a job it was never engineered to do. It offers steady preservation, not rapid expansion. Keep a portion of gold as your historical safety hedge, but push your long-term capital toward the wealth engine, productive assets that actively scale and compound. By removing the impossible expectation of high growth from your gold, you allow it to succeed at its actual job, providing a rock-solid safety floor. It no longer has to carry the crushing weight of funding your entire retirement. That leads to one of the most critical rules in personal finance. Never confuse the asset that protects your downside with the asset designed to build your upside. Getting this right requires stepping away from the noise of the family gathering and sitting quietly with your own accounts. It asks for a subtle internal recalibration, separating your respect for the people who raised you from the financial dogma they handed down. You can honor your family's history. You can cherish the jewelry passed down through generations. But you do not have to force those beautiful traditions to carry the heavy, mechanical burden of your total future security. So the next time you look at your portfolio, ask yourself the honest question: am I treating this safety asset as one useful tool in a larger system, or as an emotional substitute for a real wealth strategy?